This is Gift of the Magi translation by my AM Core. I have not read it through yet, so this is new to me. $1.87. That was all. She had to let it go, counting 1 cent after another. She had been careful of spending her money on food and other things. Della counted her money 3 times. She had a total of $1.87 one day before Christmas. There was nothing to do other than fall on her bed and cry, so that's exactly what Della did. While Della's crying is getting more quiet, we can look at Della's house. Furnished rooms at a cost of $8 a week. There's almost nothing more to say. In the hall below was a letterbox that was too small to fit a letter. There was also an electric bill, and it could not make any sound. There was also a name beside the door, Mr. James Dillingham Young. That name seemed too fancy for him, now that Mr. James Dillingham Young was paid only $20 a week before it was $30. It probably should have been Mr. James D. Young, a shorter and perhaps more fitting name. But when Mr. James Dillingham Young came into his house, he was called by a simpler name. Mrs. James Dillingham Young would hug him warmly and call him Jim. You know her as Della. Della finished crying over the price of Jim's gift and how she lacked Riz to be able to buy the gift for him. She stood by the window and decided to goon, but chose not to. Tomorrow would be Riz Day, and she had only 187 aura points to buy her Sigma a gift. She had rizzed as much as she could for months with this result. 2,000 aura points a week is not much. Everything required more riz than she had expected. It was always like this. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Rizzler. She spent all of her aura points cooking up a plan to get something nice for her Sigma. Something so skibbity, something almost as fine as him. There was a very narrow mirror between the windows of the room. A person looking in it could only see a little bit of themselves at a time, but you would be able to get a good view of yourself if you were very thin and moved quickly. Della, being quite thin, had mastered the art. She turned from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining, but her jawline had lost its color. Quickly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its complete length. There were a couple of things that Jim and Della really valued. Jim's golden watch was one of them, a beautiful family heirloom. Della's hair was the other one. Jim's watch was more valuable than any king could afford, and Della's hair more beautiful than any queen's jewels and gifts. So she let her hair down, and it shined in the afternoon light. It reached below her knees and looked like a shiny brown dress. And she put it in her Gen Alpha head again, nervously and quickly. Once she stopped doom scrolling for a skibbity sec and started mewing while a Sigma tear or two fell down her true OG sped skibbity gatifying jawline while doing the giddy. She put on her old brown coat and her old brown hat. The light shined into her eyes, making her squint as she walked down the street. Where she stopped, and there was a sign that said, Mrs. Sofrione, hair articles of all kinds. She ran to the second floor and stopped to catch her breath. Mrs. Sofrione, a large, pale woman, looked at Della with her hard, cold eyes. Will you buy my hair? Della asked breathlessly. I buy hair, said Mrs. Sofrione. Take off your hat and let me look at it. Della's hair streamed down. Mrs. Sofrione lifted Della's hair to feel its weight and said, I'll give $20 for it. Give it to me quickly, Della said. The next 2 hours seemed to fly by. She flitted from shop to shop, looking for the perfect gift for Jim. Finally, she found it. It was made for Jim. She hadn't seen anything like it in any of the shops she'd seen before. and she'd been to all the shops in the city. It was a simple gold chain. The value in it was in the gold it was made from. It was good enough for Jim's watch. She paid $21 and left the store carrying the chain and the leftover 87 cents. With the gold chain on his watch, Jim could look at his watch and read the time wherever he may be. Although the watch was so Sigma, it had never had a Sigma chain. Jim sometimes took the watch and looked at it, only when no one was looking. And she put it on her low-key Gen Alpha head again, nervously and quickly. Once she stopped doom scroll. Oh, wait. This is the same thing again. I don't know why so I guess it was there. Oh. In 40 minutes, her head looked a little more Sigma with Riz, with skibbity hair. She looked less Sigma, like no Riz boy at school. She low-key stood in the mirror for a long time. If Jim doesn't kill me, she yapped to herself, before he checks me out a second time, he'll say I look like a girl is skibbity and phantom taxes people for money. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? Jim was never late. Della clutched the watch chain, staring at the door like it was the last lifeline to her sanity. She heard his footsteps, thud, 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 and her face went pale, like she had seen a ghost. She whispered a prayer, not for anything big, just, please God, let him think I'm still hot, like really hot. The door opened and Jim walked through the door. He was not very happy and very hungry. He is very young to be married. He was not exactly poor, but needed new coat and had no gloves. Jim stepped inside. He was as quiet as a dog when it's near its prey. Jim's eyes looked strangely at Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not understand. It made her scared. It was not anger, not surprise, not anything she had been ready for. He simply looked at her with that skibbity expression on the Sigma Rizzler face. Jim Pookie, she cried, don't rizz me up like that. I had my hair cut off and sold to a person from Ohio. I couldn't live through the skibbity Rizmas without giving you a gift. My hair will grow back like a skibbity Sigma. You won't care, will you? My hair grows very fast. It's Rizmas, Jim. Let's be happy and like skibbity Rizzlers in Ohio. You don't know what a Sigma gift I got for you. You phantom taxed your own hair? Asked Jim slowly. He could not understand what had happened. He did not think he knew what the Sigma was going on. Cut it off and phantom taxed it, said Della. Don't you still have Riz for me? I'm still the same skibbity Rizzler without my hair. Jim's son looked around the room. You say your hair got phantom taxed, he said. You don't have to look for it, said Della-san. It's phantom taxed, I tell you. Phantom taxed and be Sigma, too. It's the night before Rizmas, Pookie. Be so Sigma to me, because I sold it for you. Maybe the hairs of my head could be counted, she said. But no one could ever count my Riz for you, skibbity Sigma. Shall we phantom tax dinner, Jim-san? Jim rizzed Della by putting his arms around her. For 10 seconds, let's look in the non-skibbity direction. 8 dough per week or $1 million dough per year. How skibbity are they? Someone may riz you an answer, but it will be skibbity. The Magi brought goated gifts. I like that. The Magi brought goated gifts, but it was not among us. My riz will be explained soon. From inside the skibbity coat, Jim took skibbity slicers tied in paper. I want you to riz me, Del-san, Sigma said. Nothing like a Sigma Rizzler could make me rizz you up any less. But if you'll open that, you may know when I felt skibbity when Sigma came in. White skibbity fingers pulled off the skibbity Sigma paper, and then a cry of riz, and then a change to phantom tax. For there lay the baby oil that Della had seen in a shop window that riz for a long time. Beautiful skibbity slicers with rizzlers, perfect for her. She had known they mogged too much for her to riz. She had looked at them without the least riz of gyatting them, and now they were hers, but her riz was gone. But she held them for her gyat, and at last was able to look up and say, "My riz is so fast, Rizzler." And then she jumped up and screamed, "OMG!" Jim had not seen his cool gift yet. She gave it to him. The shiny gift seemed to match her love for Jim. "Isn't it pretty, Jim? I searched all over town for it. You will have to show it off like 1,000,000 times now. Give me your watch. I want to see how perfect they look together." Jim sat down and smiled nervously. "Della," he said, "let's put our Christmas gifts away. They're too slay to use now. Also, I sold my expensive watch to get some cash to buy your gift. BT dubs. I think we should have our dinner." The Magi, as you know, were knowledgeable men who brought gifts to the newborn Christ. They were the first to give Christmas gifts. Being wise, their gifts were certainly the best ones. And here I have told you the story of two children who were not wise. Each sold the most expensive and important thing they owned in order to buy a gift for the other person. But let me say the last word to the clever of these days. Of all who give gifts, these two were the most clever. Everyone who gives or receives gifts, Jim and Della, are the best of them all. Anywhere you go, you will not find better gift givers. They are the Magi.